We got some breaking news coming out here for the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders have officially made the decision, and they have officially hired Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator. And I'm very excited about this one, man. Chip Kelly, to me, is a really, really good coach. And Adam Schefter is basically putting it out there that Chip Kelly is back to the NFL. Former Eagles head coach Chip Kelly is being hired as the Raiders offensive coordinator, according to Adam Schefter and Pete Thamel. Love the move, man. Absolutely love it. We talked about this last year with Wilkins. If you have a guy that's a head coach that specifically coaches the defensive side of the football, it's pivotal that the offensive coordinator is a good offensive coordinator. We knew that Antonio Pierce and the Raiders would go as far as the offensive coordinator you have hired. Truth be told, if the Raiders hired Cliff Kingsbury the way we initially tried to, Antonio Pierce might actually still be around right now. Antonio Pierce might still be the Raiders coach because Cliff Kingsbury would have probably had us finishing somewhere with 7 to 10 wins based off of how his offense is, as well as maybe a little bit better on the injury side for the Raiders. But Cliff Kingsbury would have won the Raiders more games. And if you guys remember, Chip Kelly was another guy that the Raiders really were thinking heavily about bringing in. And we had heard a couple different rumors as to why Chip Kelly did not take the Raiders job. In fact, it was reported that the Raiders wanted Chip Kelly more than they wanted Wilkins. And Chip Kelly essentially denied the Las Vegas Raiders last year. And the Raiders ended up getting stuck with Wilkins, and we talked about it then, and we'll talk about it now. As much success as Chip Kelly has for the Raiders on the offensive side is how much success Pete Carroll will have with this team, especially this year, right? And another thing to know with Chip Kelly is once he ultimately didn't take the Raiders job, he ended up going back to college, and he helped Ohio State win the national championship this year. So Chip Kelly, to me, has proved himself as a really, really good coach. And for the Raiders to be able to bring this guy in, absolutely love it. I could not be more excited about the offensive coordinator than Chip Kelly, right? And the thing we got to realize is, the coach that's coming into the Raiders this year, he has to not only find who the quarterback is, but he has to install the offense. He has to teach the offensive lineman that, hey, we're going to run inside zone, we're going to run outside zone, and let's say we call an outside zone and it's a guard tackle with a 3 technique or a 4-eye. If it's a 3 technique, the guard, goes up to the linebacker. It's a 4-eye, the tackle takes him, and, vice versa, right? So there's little things that the offense coordinator has to make sure are 100% correct. And that's going to allow the offense to have success. And we saw this with Wilkins last year, right? Wilkins' spacing was off. Guys were kind of confused out there. The run blocking scheme didn't look all that good because we had guys doing certain things that didn't make sense. Brock Bowers would get stuck blocking a defensive tackle. That doesn't make sense. We'd have a fullback or a guy lined up in that position kicking out a guy that, might not make sense for him to kick out. So for a guy like Chip Kelly to come into the Raiders, now he's going to get to implement his offense and his style of football. And it'll be interesting to know, what does Chip Kelly's offense really look like as we kind of, as he gets basically another shot in the NFL. If you guys remember, Chip Kelly spent time already in the NFL. 2013, 2014, 2015, Chip Kelly was with the Philadelphia Eagles. And in that time, the Philadelphia Eagles had a really, really, really good offense. In terms of points, they had a number 4 scoring offense and number 3. So they essentially had 2 top 5 offenses in terms of points in the first 2 years, and even in the third year, they still ranked 13th in points, which isn't terrible, right? That's still a pretty good offense. And then he did get fired from the Philadelphia Eagles, and he took the 49ers job. And he ranked 27th in the one and only year he was with the San Francisco 49ers in terms of points. Never really clicked for him when he got to the 49ers. And the 49ers replaced him really, really quickly with Kyle Shanahan. They didn't even give Chip Kelly a second opportunity. They knew they wanted Kyle Shanahan, and they went forward with that, and they hired Shanahan for the 2017 season. And that's obviously looked really, really good for them. But after Chip Kelly left the 49ers, he ended up going back to college. He ended up going back to UCLA. And he's had some success there, right? So he was able to turn the program around. In most recently, the last 3 seasons, hasn't been absolutely phenomenal, but the guy has had success. And of course, this last year he went to Ohio State where he won the national championship. So now he's going to come to the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Raiders will get to figure out how they're going to run this offense going forward. One of the interesting things that I think sometimes gets overlooked is, yes, you got to have a great offensive coordinator, but you also got to have a coach on that offensive side that knows how to pick some of the positional units on that side, right? I think the offensive line coach is very, very important. if you think about some of the coaches in the NFL right now, some of the best offensive lines are coached by some of the best offensive line coaches. Jeff Stoutland is by far the best coach in the NFL. But we got other guys as well, right? Bill Callahan's pretty good. Bill Benenbo of Oklahoma's pretty good, right? Oklahoma's been producing a lot of NFL caliber offensive lines. Sometimes being the offensive coordinator is one aspect of it, but being able to hire those positional units is another part of it. Think about a guy like Rob Leonard. The year before the Raiders had Rob Leonard, our defensive line was not good, right? I think that was the 2022 season. And Rob Leonard comes in 2023 ranked top 10 in sacks and productions in terms of pressures and those type of things. And then even in 2024, our defensive line was pretty solid, right? So positional unit coaches matters. And sometimes when you have a guy like Wilkins in, you might not be able to get one of the best offensive line coaches. You might have to hire a first-time offensive line coach the way the Raiders did this past season. It really didn't work out for us, right? Not that our offensive line was terrible, but it wasn't that good, in my opinion. But of course, it was a rookie offensive line coach. So maybe if the Raiders do keep him, James Craig around next year, he might be a little bit better. But something tells me Chip Kelly will want to bring in his own staff. So we'll see how that kind of ends up happening for the Raiders to just kind of go forward. One of the interesting things that's going to get overlooked a little bit is who's going to be the Raiders quarterback. And of course, some people are going to say, hey, maybe Chip Kelly can utilize a guy like Gardner Minshew. Maybe a guy like Aiden O'Connell, right? Maybe one of these two guys can work for a guy like Chip Kelly. If you guys remember, Ohio State also has another really solid quarterback coming out this year. Right now, he is being projected as like a 2nd to 3rd round pick. But, one of the things that always happens every single year is as the draft process kind of starts, for some people, it starts like in November, December. We're in January, February at this point. The Senior Bowl just ended. We're about to get to the point where as we get closer and closer, we start to realize which quarterbacks actually will end up going in the top 10 and which quarterbacks won't. Last year, early on in the process, people were like, hey, Caleb Williams is a first-round quarterback. That's kind of where it's at, right? We don't really know if there's going to be any other quarterback. People are like, hey, Bo Nix sucks. People are like, Michael Penix Jr. sucks. These are like 3rd-round picks. And we saw that as the process continued, we started getting more rumors and more reports that, hey, NFL teams are actually putting some of these guys, at the top, right? Some of these guys are being valued a lot higher than what the general people are kind of thinking. With a guy like Will Howard coming out, some people think he could be a top 10 pick. Some people think the Raiders might take him in the top 10, right? Now, I'm not saying let's 100% do that. But if Chip Kelly thinks Will Howard's going to be the best quarterback out of this class, and if Chip Kelly thinks he can get the most out of Will Howard, and maybe it's not the 6th overall pick, maybe you get him in the 2nd round, but I wouldn't be opposed to Chip Kelly saying I can make it work with that guy. And maybe it's not Will Howard, right? Maybe it's one of these other quarterbacks coming out. But the guy like Chip Kelly, he can mold the quarterback into his offense. And I think for the Raiders, it's the best place you can be in. Another thing we got to realize with Chip Kelly is Chip Kelly's not a coach that's going to be here for 1 year and then he's off to becoming a head coach, right? I think Chip Kelly, if he wants to become a head coach, is probably 2 or 3 years out. So for the Raiders, that means for the next 2 years, we'll have an offensive coordinator that'll be consistent, right? And remember, when you have a defensive-minded head coach, it's important to realize how long these offensive coordinators are going to be here because at some point, you got to replace him, right? And when that time comes that you got to replace Chip Kelly, if you're the Raiders, you want to make sure, you at least get a good amount of time with the guy that you do ultimately choose. Now, another thing that's going to be interesting is which one of these offensive players from Ohio State has Chip Kelly seen enough of where he's comfortable drafting some of these guys, right? Because we know the Raiders have some needs, right? You can make the argument the Raiders need a tackle, a receiver, a running back, and Ohio State has all of that. In fact, I think Ohio State might have the best tackle coming out of this class in Josh Simmons. Now, of course, if you wanted Simmons, you probably have to take him with the 6th overall pick. But Ohio State has the arguably best offense tackle coming out, and Chip Kelly has seen this guy's habits. He's seen, is this guy smart? Does he process well? More than that, Emeka Egbuka is another guy that's kind of coming out this year, wide receiver. Donovan Jackson, really good interior offensive lineman. Will Howard, of course, the quarterback. You got the 2 running backs in Quishon Judkins, as well as Travion Henderson, right? So there's a realistic chance that the Raiders this year are going to end up drafting a number of guys from Ohio State. Right, there's a real chance the Raiders are going to bring in some of these guys. And Ohio State's deep, right? It's not just those guys, right? They have a good center. They have another good guard coming out as well. They have some, 2nd, 3rd string wide receivers and tight ends. Obviously, they're guys that are not household names, but they're guys that could be productive in the NFL. So it'll be interesting as the Raiders kind of get into the process, who they bring in from Ohio State. It'll be interesting to see which guys get hired as the positional coaches. And it'll be interesting to see if Chip Kelly can actually have success with the Raiders, because Chip Kelly's a good coach, right? He's proven himself. He's a good coach. He's one of those guys you can win with. And I think when you pair up a guy like Chip Kelly, Patrick Graham, offense, defense, and then Pete Carroll's kind of the CEO, or he's kind of putting it together, I'm telling you guys right now, the Raiders have a realistic shot to make the playoffs this year. We have a realistic chance to actually win a playoff game. And I know it's still early and we don't have a quarterback, but sometimes having that offensive coordinator is what matters, because that guy can mold quarterbacks to having success. We've seen it happen with Geno Smith. We've seen it happen with Baker Mayfield. Brock Purdy's another guy, late round pick, comes into a good scheme system. So we'll see what ends up happening. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.